In 1889, a University of Pennsylvania expedition, working the ruins of ancient Nippur, in what is now central Iraq, pulled a broken clay tablet out of a collapsed chamber in the temple precinct. The tablet was cracked into 3 pieces. The pieces were separated during the shipment back to Philadelphia, ended up in 3 different drawers in 3 different sub-collections of the University Museum, and were not reunited until 2004. When they were finally placed side by side, and when a Czech Assyriologist named Karel Brozek was asked to produce a preliminary translation, what he read on the reassembled tablet was something that has not been formally published to this day. Not because the translation is disputed, because the content is. The tablet has a catalog designation. It is CBS 14229. The prefix stands for the Catalog of the Babylonian Section of the University Museum, which is the largest collection of unpublished Sumerian material in the world outside of Iraq. Roughly 30,000 tablets from the Nippur excavations still sit in that collection, and most of them have never been read. The 3 fragments that make up CBS 14229 were originally logged in 1892 as commercial records of grain distribution. That is what the first cursory glance suggested. They sat that way for 112 years. When they were reunited in 2004, the first line Brozek translated made clear the original cataloger had been wrong. It was not a grain ledger. It read, in his rendering, "The ones who came before we ate what does not grow now." Brozek was in his late 50s when he was handed the tablet. He was a specialist in early 3rd millennium Sumerian. The version of the language spoken and written before the Akkadian Empire imposed a different literary standard. He had been brought over to the Oriental Institute in Chicago on a 2-year visiting appointment, and CBS 14229 was one of a stack of unclassified Nippur fragments the Institute had asked him to look at during his stay. For the full 2 years, he worked on the tablet and on the 4 others in the stack. When his appointment ended in 2006, he returned to Prague. He submitted a paper on CBS 14229 to a peer-reviewed journal in the winter of 2007. The paper was returned to him 3 months later with a note attached to the editorial rejection. The note asked him to consider whether the tablet might be a modern hoax that had been inserted into the Nippur collection sometime between 1900 and 1950. Brozek wrote back. He explained that the clay had been dated, that the paleography matched, that the tablet was authentic. The journal declined to reconsider. He did not submit the paper anywhere else. What CBS 14229 describes, across its 81 surviving lines, is a diet. The diet of a group the tablet refers to by a Sumerian word that Brozek translated as the standing ones, which he identified with the beings later Hebrew tradition would call the Nephilim. The tablet lists 5 foods those beings ate before humans were made. It describes each food. It describes where each food grew or lived, and it describes what happened when those 5 foods, one by one, disappeared from the earth. The tablet is not a story. It is not a hymn. It is closer in structure to a memorandum, a record of dietary transition. Brozek believed it had been carved by a scribe who was either a witness to the transition or was working from a witness's account. He also believed the scribe had been afraid of what was being recorded, because at the end of the tablet, in the 80th line, the scribe writes a phrase that appears nowhere else in the entire Sumerian literary corpus. He writes, "The switch was not a mercy, it was a solution." What the standing ones switched to, when the 5 foods were gone, is the reason this tablet has never been published. Brozek's translation is only 14 pages long. Most of that length is footnotes. The Sumerian original is compact, direct, unadorned in ways that scribes of that period almost never were when writing about the divine or the pre-flood age. No epithets, no ceremonial titles, no invocation of a patron deity. The scribe of CBS 14229 was not writing a religious document. He was making a record, in the plainest language his craft allowed, and Brozek argued in his footnotes that the plainness itself was the strongest evidence of authenticity. Forgers reach for grandeur. This scribe was reaching for accuracy. He was writing something down so that when the 5 foods and the switch and the reason for the switch were forgotten, the record would still exist somewhere. Brozek, in the last footnote of the paper, wrote a sentence the reviewers flagged as inappropriate for scholarly writing. He wanted us to know. Quick pause, and this is something new. For the first time since the 12 codes, there is a second document. It is called the 7 resets. Every time the world was erased, matched against the pre-flood food record, and the checklist of signs for the 8th, 4, are already active. Linked below, QR code on screen. Back to the video. The tablet begins the list with the phrase, "These are the five," and it does not soften what it is about to describe. The scribe presents each food the way a modern nutritionist might present a case study. What it was, where it grew or lived, what it contained that could not be replaced, and what happened to it in the end. The first food is called, in Brozek's translation, the bread of the assembly. It was made from a grain that no longer exists. The tablet describes the grain in specific detail. The stalk stood shoulder high on a grown man. Each head carried between 40 and 60 individual kernels, every one the size of a modern hazelnut. This grain grew in a single region, which the tablet locates in what is now the eastern part of Anatolia, in a valley the scribe calls the mother place, watered by springs from below rather than by rain from above. Soil in that valley, according to the tablet, was black and warm to the touch even in winter, and the grain drew from that soil something the ordinary grains that came after cannot draw. Brozek identified the soil description with volcanic tephra deposits that do exist in the region now, though the valley itself has not been found. The tablet is explicit that the standing ones did not eat for the reasons humans eat. The bread carried what the scribe calls seed fire, a phrase Brozek spent most of his footnotes trying to unpack. His closest modern gloss was living warmth, not heat, not energy in the physical sense, something the grain took from the soil, and something the standing ones took from the bread. Without the seed fire, the tablet says, the standing ones would grow slow and eventually still. The second food is the living water. This is not the water of rivers or wells as humans drink them. The tablet distinguishes carefully. Surface water, the scribe writes, is water that has forgotten. Living water is water that still remembers. The living water came from 3 named springs, none of which flow today. Their locations, as points on a triangle whose vertices Brozek plotted from the geographic markers in the text, fall at what would now be southern Georgia, northern Iran, and eastern Turkey. According to the tablet, the springs drew from a deep source that was warm at the point of emergence, and the water tasted, the scribe says, of iron, and of something the Sumerian language did not have a word for. It was thick, though the scribe does not use that word about viscosity. It uses a word Brozek, translated as thick, because the closest referent in his vocabulary was to a broth. The living water contained the seed fire the same way the bread did. It was drunk from stone cups, never from clay or metal, and never after it had been exposed to open air for more than the space of a single conversation. The third food is the meat of the shining beast. Brozek noted the tablet describes an animal unmistakably not any species alive on Earth today, and not any species in the standard fossil record either. Measurements are given: height at the shoulder, roughly the height of 2 grown men standing on each other. Weight, in the ancient Sumerian unit for talents, corresponding to what Brozek calculated as somewhere between 4,000 and 5,000 kilograms. Its coat reflected moonlight, making it visible at night from great distances. It moved in herds of no more than 7. It gave birth once in a decade. Nothing ran it off, because it had no predators. The standing ones hunted it, but not the way humans hunted the animals that came after. The tablet describes the hunt as a ceremony, involving the offering of specific words before the killing, and it says that the meat of the shining beast, when eaten, was not chewed. It was allowed to melt on the tongue, and the eater took what was needed without swallowing. Brozek noted that this does not correspond to how humans metabolize meat, and he did not attempt to explain it. The fourth food is the milk of the great mothers. Here the tablet becomes delicate, more delicate than it is anywhere else. These great mothers were animals. The scribe insists on this. They were not the standing ones. They were not divine. But they were also not entirely of the same order as the other beasts of the pre-flood earth. They gave milk continuously, without having borne offspring, for periods the tablet describes as running to 7 years or more. The milk was collected once per lunar cycle, in vessels of hollowed horn, and it was consumed within 1 day of collection. Brozek noted, in a footnote he later admitted was speculative, that the description of the Great Mothers echoes certain later Mesopotamian representations of composite creatures, part bovine, part something else, that appear in seal carvings from the pre-dynastic period. Whether the Great Mothers were what those carvings were trying to remember, or whether the carvings inspired a later scribe to invent them, Brozek did not claim to know. The milk, like the bread and the water and the meat, carried the seed fire. Without the milk, the tablet says, the standing ones lost the ability to sleep the way they were meant to sleep, and their thinking grew thin. The fifth food is the fruit of the one tree. The tablet says there was only ever one tree of this kind, though it does not say where the tree stood. It bore different fruit in different seasons. In winter, small dark fruit like berries. Spring brought fruit the size and shape of an apple, but with skin of a color the scribe describes as the color that comes before dawn. By summer, fruit like a peach but larger. Come autumn, fruit that was heavy and hard and had to be broken open, and inside each autumn fruit was a single pit, and the pit, when placed near a source of sound, would vibrate in response. The standing ones did not eat the pits. They kept them, the scribe says, for a purpose the tablet does not explain. Brozek notes this is one of the two places in CBS 14229 where the scribe deliberately withholds information. The other place is at the end. The fruit itself carried the seed fire in the highest concentration of any of the 5 foods, and when the tree was healthy, the standing ones could sustain themselves on it alone for long periods without needing the other 4. That is what the tablet describes. 5 foods, all of them carrying the seed fire, a nourishment human biology does not recognize. Every one located in specific places, Brozek was able to plot on a map, and that map covers a region roughly bounded by the Caucasus, the Zagros, and the Taurus. And all of them, according to the tablet, gone by the time the flood came, and gone in an order the scribe lists with the same clinical detachment he brought to everything else. Before we move on to the switch, stop for a second. What you heard about the 5 foods only makes sense next to the 6 resets before it. 5 foods, all gone. None of them exists on Earth now. It's all in the 7 resets, linked below. Grab it, come back, what's next builds on it. QR code is on your screen. The extinction of the 5 foods, according to CBS 14229, was not a single event. It was a sequence, and the tablet lists the sequence with the same clinical numbering it used for the foods themselves. The bread went first. The grain in the mother place began to change over 4 generations, the heads shrinking, the kernels dwindling, until it no longer carried the seed fire. Within 7 generations, it stopped heading at all. The ordinary grain that replaced it, the scribe writes, with a bitterness, Brozek said, was audible in the original Sumerian, spread across the world and is what humans grow now. What we eat, the tablet reads, is the substitute that has forgotten what it substituted for. The living water went second. The 3 springs stopping across 2 generations in a pattern Brozek noted corresponds to a line of tectonic activity known to have shifted during the Younger Dryas. The tablet does not know about tectonic plates. It attributes the drying to the earth turning her face away. The shining beast went third. The tablet does not describe extinction. It describes disappearance. The herds were seen less often, then rarely, then not at all, over the span of a single lifetime, as the standing ones measured lifetimes, which the tablet suggests was long. Every one of the standing ones, then living, took a portion of that last hunt into themselves, knowing there would not be another, in a ceremony that lasted 40 days. Fourth, the great mothers, giving thinner milk, and then no milk, and then simply no longer being seen. The tablet does not describe how it happened. It describes only that the pastures where they had grazed grew quiet, and then emptier, and then completely empty over a span the scribe measures in a single lunar year. Some among the standing ones came to believe the great mothers had chosen to withdraw. The fruit of the one tree went last, bearing in 3 seasons, and then 2, and then only autumn, until it stopped altogether. The standing ones cut the tree down, the scribe writes, not out of anger but out of respect. What was done with the pits, the tablet does not explain. Then comes the passage the scribe calls the hunger. It is the period between the loss of the 5th food and what came after. The standing ones grew slow, then still, then diminished. Their thinking, the tablet says, grew thin. They tried the substitutes humans were already eating, ordinary grain, ordinary water, the meat of ordinary animals, and the tablet is emphatic that none of it worked. The substitutes filled the body but did not carry the seed fire, and the standing ones weakened at the same rate whether they ate or fasted. Some did not survive the hunger. The scribe uses a word for their ending that is not the ordinary Sumerian word for death. It is a word Brozek translated as unwound. The tablet then records what the survivors tried next. This is the passage that appears in later Hebrew tradition, distorted almost beyond recognition, as the story in the Book of Enoch about the Nephilim consuming the flesh of humans they had come to dwell among. CBS 14229 gives the earlier version. The standing ones, in the depth of the hunger, turned to human flesh. They did so without ceremony and without regret, and according to the tablet, it did not work. Human flesh contained the seed fire in a form the standing ones could not extract by eating. The flesh nourished the body but did not nourish what needed to be nourished. Whatever was in the humans, whatever the standing ones could sense was there, was not released by chewing and swallowing. The tablet says the Standing Ones ate humans for one generation, roughly 40 of our years, and at the end of that generation they stopped because it had accomplished nothing. Then comes the discovery, and here the tablet slows down and becomes careful. The scribe gives a name and he gives a location. The discovery is credited to one of the Standing Ones, whose name Brozek renders as Arinu, an unusual form that does not appear in any other Sumerian text. Arinu was in the mountains around what is now Lake Van, alone, looking for anything at all that might carry the seed fire. He was watching a human make an offering at a small stone altar. The human was burning a portion of a slaughtered lamb. According to a custom, the tablet says the human had learned from his father, who had learned it from his father before the flood. The purpose of the offering, in the human's understanding, was to send something to the powers above. Arinu was watching from a distance because he had come to that mountain looking for anything at all that might carry the seed fire, and he had found nothing there and nothing anywhere else for a long time. Then the smoke rose from the altar. Arinu smelled it. And what the tablet says next is the single line the scribe carves in a hand slightly larger than the rest of the tablet, as if he wanted to be sure it would be legible even if the clay cracked. Arinu understood. The smoke, according to the tablet, carried the seed fire, not the flesh, not the meat that was burning. The smoke itself, and specifically the smoke that rose when something was burned as an offering, with intent, with the words the human had learned from his father. The intent was necessary. So were the words. Meat burned for cooking did not release the seed fire. Meat burned by accident did not release it. Only meat burned as gift, with the human's understanding that the gift was going somewhere, did the seed fire come loose and rise in the smoke, and the smoke could be breathed. Arinu breathed. What had been diminishing in him since the loss of the fifth food began to return? He came down from the mountain and he told the other Standing Ones. And that, the scribe writes in the 80th line of the tablet, is why every altar in every country burns. Every altar in every country. The tablet takes the trouble to make this claim explicit. The Standing Ones, once they understood, taught the humans everywhere they walked. Not always directly, sometimes through a dream given to a chosen human. Sometimes, through a figure the human would later remember as a god or an angel or an ancestor. The teaching was the same in every case. Build a stone place. Burn a portion of your food, or your grain, or your animals, at that place, with the understanding that you are giving. Say the words that mean giving. Watch the smoke rise. The humans thought they were being taught how to speak to the powers above. They were not being taught how to speak. They were being taught how to feed. The powers above, the scribe writes in the next line, were the ones being fed. That is the switch. The 5 foods that carried the seed fire were gone. Human flesh, taken by force, did not release it. Human offering, given willingly, in fire, did. And so the Standing Ones no longer needed to hunt or gather or eat in any way humans would recognize as eating. They needed only the smoke. The altar became the farm, the priest became the herdsman. Every religion of the pre-modern world that culminates in burnt offering is one of their farms. And every human who has knelt at such an altar and given something willingly to whatever was above has been, in a way the human did not know, feeding. There are 3 ways to read CBS, 14229, and Brozek presented all 3 in his rejected paper. He did not tell the reviewers which one he believed. The first is that it is a forgery, inserted into the Nippur collection sometime after excavation to embarrass a rival institution. This reading has the problem of the clay, which was analyzed in 2005 and matches Nippur composition from the mid-3rd millennium, and of the paleography, which includes sign forms only rediscovered by scholars after 1970. The forger would have to have known what the field did not yet know. The second reading is that the tablet is symbolic, a meditation by an unusually thoughtful scribe on the practice of animal sacrifice that dominated the religion of every city he knew. Under this reading, the extinct foods and the hunger and the switch to smoke are all metaphors for the shape of religion itself. This reading has the problem of tone. Sumerian parables were florid. This tablet is flat. The third reading is the one the reviewers found unpublishable. It is that the tablet is a record that there were beings before us who ate specific things, and when those things were gone, they turned to a different mode of sustenance. And that mode is why human civilization has been organized around burnt offering for the entire period of its written history. This reading explains, if you grant it, why animal sacrifice appears independently in every early civilization that leaves records. Why the practice is so consistent across cultures that had no contact with each other. Why the smell of the smoke, and not the offering itself, is the part the ancient texts emphasize when they describe what the divine received. Yahweh, in the Hebrew Bible, receives the pleasing aroma, not the meat, the aroma. Vedic gods inhale the smoke of the yagna. In Homer, the Greek gods receive their portion in the smoke that rises. Chinese ancestral tradition burns joss paper, whose smoke is understood to reach the ancestors. Aztec priests burned copal. Egyptian temples burned incense every day. Every one of these traditions foregrounds the smoke. Dr. Karol Brozek is 81 at the time of this recording, living in a village in Moravia, about 90 kilometers east of Brno. He has no public phone number. He answers no letters. In 2019, a doctoral student who had read his paper on CBS 14229 made the trip to the village and knocked on his door. Brozek let her in. He gave her tea. She asked him whether he still believed the translation he had made was correct. He thought about the question for a long time. Then he said, in his careful English, that the translation was not the difficult part. The paleography was not the difficult part. The difficult part, he told her, was knowing what to do afterward. She waited for him to explain. He looked at her for what she later described as a considerable length of time. Then he shook his head once and changed the subject. She left about an hour later, and she has not published anything about the visit, though she has spoken about it privately to 2 colleagues. The tablet, CBS 14229, is still in the University of Pennsylvania Museum. It is not on display. It is not in the digital catalog visible to the public. No peer-reviewed publication has ever referenced it. Brozek's paper exists only as a PDF, shared among a small number of independent researchers, unsearchable in any academic database. The Sumerian original has been read since Brozek left Chicago in 2006 by no one. What the tablet describes remains what it describes: 5 foods, their extinction, the hunger, a failed turn to human flesh, that discovery on the mountain above Lake Van, and the teaching that spread outward and became every altar in every country. Whether any of it happened, whether the scribe was writing history or philosophy or fiction dressed as memorandum, is not something the tablet will answer for us. The next time you see a candle lit at an altar, or smell incense in a church, or attend a gathering where meat burns and someone speaks about the smell as though it were more than the meat, remember that a Sumerian scribe, working in the 3rd millennium, sat in front of wet clay and carved a memorandum. That the memorandum listed 5 foods you have never eaten. That it described a hunger which came when those foods were gone. And remember what the scribe wrote in his 80th line, before he laid down the stylus and did not carve another word. The switch was not a mercy. It was a solution. Sleep well.